Warthunder radars can be confusing, right? And in this video, I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a crash course about everything you need to know. But first, before we start, we do have to go through some keybinds that you're going to need. You need switch radar IRST on off. You need switch between radar and IRST. You need to switch radar in IRST mode. You need within visual range combat. You need IRST search mode. You also need change radar IRST scope scale. You need to be able to select the target to lock, and you have to be able to lock that target. And then all the buttons that you see that say not assigned for radar, you don't need those, but those are more advanced controls if you wanted to get even better with radar. The default radar looks kind of like this. Everything you need to know is actually labeled on this screen, although it is a lot, so I get if you're kind of confused. The azimuth and elevation scan angles is pretty much how much of the sky are you scanning at one time. A radar target is something that you can lock, and a selected radar target is what you are actually locking. The range ring is basically just showing the markers of distance, and the range scale is basically showing how long the range rings are. The radar sweep is showing where your radar is currently pointing. The power indicator basically just tells you that the radar is up and working, and ground clutter is basically telling you if there's any issue with feedback from the sensors. Basically, if you are in a search radar, you don't want that to happen. This kind of like semicircle version of a radar is really good at telling distance, but it's not really good at telling orientation to your aircraft. If you go into your options, you can switch over to the rectangular radar. This is much better at telling orientation, but is lackluster when telling distance. This radar is going to show you basically the same exact thing the other one showed you, except a little bit different. And you can kind of see it with the range setting. That's the maximum distance this radar is scanning. If you're still stumped about learning how like the angles work about radars, here's a little graphic to help you understand. In addition to that, on your radar screens, you will notice different types of blips, and you have to know the shapes and what they mean. A normal target is just a box. A selected target is a box with two little things on either side of it. Someone that you have locked is a box within a box. And then if you have identify friendly or foe and some top tier aircraft, a box with a little line on top of it means it's a friendly. Now on the radar modes, the most basic one in the game is the search radar. It can lock on the enemies, although it gets cluttered by clouds and ground. Search PD filters out the ground and clouds, but enemies not moving in respect to you will also appear as nothing. This is also called notching, which is a defensive maneuver. Search PD head-on is mainly for head-ons. Some radars may even filter out vehicles that are moving away from you, so you can only see what's moving at you. Search PD velocity head-on is going to put the people who are moving fastest first, and that's for cycling. Search MTI filters out ground clutter, and it is harder to notch than PD, but it has a way smaller search window, and radar missiles might not track as well on this mode. TWS stands for track while scan. It allows you to scan the sky and track enemies at the same exact time, although it's not a hard lock, and you can fire Fox 3s on this mode. TWS head-on is basically just TWS or track while scan for enemies that are only flying towards you. For BVR, this is an extremely useful mode to use. Next up, we have ACM or air combat mode. It basically just tightens your search window to the very smallest amount it can and searches it very quickly. The ultimate mode is HMS PD. This allows the user to look around with their radar, and you can just pick and choose the target if they're within a set range. Don't forget, you do have to click your lock target button. This mode is only really available after like 12.3 on select aircraft, and it's extremely useful for dogfights. At a lower BR, you can find continuously updating radars. It's basically just a search radar that can't lock. Additionally, there are radar cannon sights. I can't say the actual name because TikTok don't let me, but the radar basically automatically ranges the target you're locking. In higher tier vehicles, this also gives you a lead indicator. Finally, onto the ground radars, there is a search ground mode. It's basically just a search radar that can see ground targets. It works best when the targets are actually moving. There's also a ground TWS mode that allows you to see multiple targets at once and pick and choose what you want. It is also really dependent on if they're moving or not. Search and track IR is away from actual radars, but this is part of the keybind system, so I'm still going to cover it. It scans for IR signatures and will lock the IR signatures without giving the enemy any type of radar indication. Sadly though, this only works for IR missiles and can't be used to sling any type of radar missile. Moving on to the missiles themselves, a Fox 1 is just a normal radar missile, meaning you have to keep the lock throughout the entire flight of the missile path. But first you have to be able to lock the enemy. Like in this clip, I'm using search PD, and then once you see the two lines, that means your missile has enough energy to hit the enemy. Now it's pretty much just a waiting game after you fire the missile. Your entire job is just to keep that lock at all costs. Next up are Fox 3 missiles. These missiles have an onboard radar system. The radar system on board should kick in at about 16 kilometers in what's called a pit bull. Before that, it's relying on your own radar's data link. But don't worry about that part. All you have to know is you don't have to keep a lock on the Fox 3 missile target. And you can find these missiles available after 13.0. And finally, IRST, although technically it's not a radar mode, I did show it off before, but it just attaches your IR missile seeker to the enemy you are locking. There's no other perks. Now to be entirely honest, using all these keybinds is definitely not possible for any console players unless you're on mouse and keyboard. If you plan to learn a bunch of radar stuff on console, I suggest using the multifunction menu so you don't have a bunch of random keybinds. keybinds. Also note the fact that this video is only covering so much about radars. You still haven't learned how to use them correctly with any type of radar missile or dodge them or learn their weaknesses and stuff like that. And finally, the best way to learn how to use radar is legitimately just load into a match and just trial and error and use it over and over again till you get it down pat. Going through tech trees without premiums will help you with that because it exposes you to technology as it evolves. And all I'm going to say is good luck, and I'll be answering any questions in the comment section.